Good afternoon. Welcome to Community and Technology. We connect the global community with news, information, and resources that will hopefully help improve your life. I'm Stu
Hey,
Reed with my
Stu.
co-host, Dave Burstein.
Yeah,
What's up?
Stu. Are you real or are you just an AI talking to us?
Sometimes I don't know. I got to go check with my wife and then have her let me know what she's seeing and feeling. But yeah, AI is getting kind of scary. What's going on out there, Dave? What's the latest?
We've all heard about deepfakes. The latest story there is that Scarlett Johansson, the voice actor, who
Mhm.
was more than a voice actor in most of her movies, in the movie Her, well, I have to be careful what I say because I don't have proof. Many people thought, including her family, that the voice OpenAI was using for their new chat GPT with voice called Sky was her,
No, Dave, didn't they actually initially approach her and try and get permission to use her very voice for that?
which is why she was shocked, angered, and disbelief because she twice had said no to it. So they hired an actor, they won't say who, to do something. It just happened to hire an actor that was so close to her voice that even her family thought so.
Hmm.
Yeah, last September, this is her letter. Last September, I received an offer from Sam Altman, who wanted me to hire the current ChatGPT 4.0 system to voice the current. Uh, he said, I, she could bridge the gap between tech companies and creatives and help consumers be comfortable with the seismic shift concerning humans in LA.
That was,
He
that
said
was,
he
that was
thought,
the come on. Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
And
She wasn't buying it, though, was she, Dave?
she said no. He asked her a second time two weeks ago, and she said no. And now it's out there. We can talk about the new 4.0, which is free at ChatGPT and can do a voice chat, but it no longer has the voice called Sky.
Oh, so they pulled it.
They pulled it. This note here talks about she's hired lawyers uh, and as she says, we are all grappling with deepfakes and the protection of our own likeness, our own work, our own identities. I believe these are questions that deserve absolute clarity. Uh, and she wants the passage of appropriate legislation to help ensure that individual rights are protected.
But Dave,
Now,
I'm wondering what would be what would be the legal approach if I hired somebody whose voice sounded very much like yours? You wouldn't agree, but I found somebody who had a voice similar to yours, and I used it. I mean, is that what's where's I understand where the harm is, but where's the illegality?
uh, it comes into various rights. An old story, which I can't confirm, is that a fellow named Joe DiMaggio
Hmm.
opened a restaurant, put up a big sign with the name of the restaurant, Joe DiMaggio's. Joe DiMaggio, the baseball player who was very famous back then, went to court and forced him to change the name because it was confusing people and people were thinking he was the one responsible for that, even though the guy's name happened to be Joe DiMaggio.
Wow, wow, that's amazing.
Now, it's going to be very hard to write laws. In fact, it's going to be even harder, I think, to tell whether it's the original person or not.
Hmm.
Because deepfakes are getting so good. We got a story coming later in the show about a $25 million scam that was pulled off using deepfakes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But AI is the second half of the show today.
Okay.
Let's get to things that are more interesting.
Yeah, I think you got some more medical breakthroughs, which seems like every week there's a new breakthrough. What's the latest?
Yeah, it seems like every week we can open with a story. That's the latest medical breakthrough. Get a good doctor who can connect you with the trials. The latest is for small cell lung cancer.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Palometabit, Imeldeltra, and it just got approved by the FDA. It works pretty well on many of the people with that particular kind of cancer. 40% of the people in the trial had enormous progress, and the news story about it had a lady who got the drug 2 years ago when her doctor said she only had a few months
Mm.
and is still with us,
Wow.
doing well and playing tennis.
Wow, that's big.
That's big. They rushed it through. They don't have nearly as much evidence as they usually have for drugs, but this was important enough. Here's her quote. Her name is Ms. Warren, and I feel as normal as I did before I had cancer. There's a lot of hope with this drug.
Wow. Wow.
This is going to be legal, and they're going to be distributing it that doctors can write prescriptions for it probably in a few weeks.
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, do we have any sense, Dave, of what proportion of lung cancer in general is this small cell lung cancer, and is there a treatment for the other lung cancers that are not small?
There actually are about a dozen different drugs
Mm-hmm.
for the different types of cancer, which are called non-small cell.
Right.
And these names were put that when they look at the microscope and saw the cancer cells, there was big cells and there were little cells.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how they named them 75 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that there are really many different versions of cancer that to an ordinary microscope look alike and are called non-small cell. So they've put out somewhere between 9, maybe more, drugs in the last few years. I missed this entirely, that often cure people.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Small cell, 35,000 people a year haven't had anything to do. 30 years ago, when my mother died of lung cancer, we went looking at all the experimental treatments.
Wow.
They were starting to use TIL cells, tumor-infiltrated lymphocyte cells, at NIH. And we found a doctor in the trial who said, I can't give it to you. It's just going to kill you.
Wow.
In so many words.
Yeah. Interesting. My mom died of lung cancer as well, Dave, about 35 years ago. So I mean, it was a total killer back then. You know, they gave her radiation, and it was so the radiation. I'm sorry, chemo. They gave her chemo, and the chemo was so debilitating. She finally said, "Okay, no more of this. I'm just gonna go with whatever happens." And she just stopped the chemo because it was so painful and debilitating, and just was worse than the disease.
If you have a doctor who's telling you they can't do anything about your lung cancer, get another doctor.
Gotcha.
That has changed.
Mm-hmm. Thank God.
The article I found this in was talking about doctors saying it's going to change our practice.
Mm-hmm.
Now here. Have you had a friend whose back pain would never go away? Low back pain?
Yes, I've had it. It did go away, but I know other folks that have had it for decades and seemingly intractable.
There are a lot of people doctors couldn't do anything for. They often tried surgery, which usually didn't work,
Mm-hmm.
and was dangerous surgery. And now there's something that's promising that goes into a story we and everybody else has been covering. Elon Musk has a company that is doing deep brain stimulation by putting an extremely thin wire into one part of your brain, and it's been able to allow somebody who doesn't talk to play chess, to describe the moves and have them play chess.
Hmm.
That was a really dramatic story a few months ago.
Yeah, we brought that one to the show. That was dramatic.
Yeah, we keep getting these medical stories, and it's wonderful.
Hmm.
Uh,
So what's the
that
latest?
fellow actually had the wire break, and
Mm,
they hope to fix it.
right.
And they just got approval from the feds to try it on a second person.
Hmm.
However, lots of other shops are doing it. And one of them, which is just doing it, is doing it for low back pain. That they put a wire that goes to deep brain stimulation, goes to the subgenual cingulate cortex. And it reduces pain, opioid use, and disability. Was well tolerated with no serious adverse effects.
Hmm.
Now, there's only one human being they've tried it on so far. They
Okay,
obviously don't want to have
that's
most
not much of a sample there, Dave.
But given how this could never be treated, that's really good. Really welcome. But on both of these, there's going to be a big issue.
Mhm.
How much is it going to cost? Stu, what have we been hearing about the treatments that they have now, which are using a gene modification and
Yeah,
so
well,
on?
there's a story that just came out about restoring hearing in children with gene modification. We talked about that with sickle cell and some cancers last week, but now stories coming out about how an 18-month-old girl who was one of 10 children that had been treated and with this gene therapy. And apparently there is a hereditary mutation that happens in something called the OTOF gene that prevents the ear's hair cells from communicating with the brain. Well, this therapy delivers a functioning copy of that gene, the OTOF gene, to the inner ear using a virus, interestingly enough. Not sure how that works, but it uses a virus to deliver a replacement gene. And after 4 weeks, this young girl began to hear again. And so far, 10 out of 11 kids in the trial have restored hearing as a result of this gene therapy.
Now, gene therapy is pretty dangerous. They usually have to knock out your immune system, and you're terribly vulnerable to infections and have to stay in the hospital for a month and so on. That's something that means you have to really be careful deciding, but they are curing sickle cell.
Mm-hmm.
And a good sized trial, it wasn't the 2,000 you'd usually want, but it was an awful lot more than one. This, how does the gene modification work? How does a virus work? A virus has no way to make more viruses. It can't reproduce. It gets into a cell in your or an animal body and hooks into the cell's system to make copies of the virus, some of which are completely harmless, and we don't know how they have, but many of them we know what viruses can be. That's the same cell way they're getting in the new genetic material that replaces what is not there because of the mutation.
Now, Dave, I know we talked about, on the sickle cell gene therapy, had to totally knock out your immune system to put in this new gene. It sounds like that's not the case with this gene that's delivered via virus. Is that so?
I haven't seen the original medical articles, which actually I usually do check before I big things as a radio show. Most reporters don't look at such things, but I've learned how to read medical articles. I don't know. It was probably it's
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 interesting that,
encouraging.
that's not noted in this story, and that was a huge item. I won't even say sidebar. That was a huge feature of the sickle cell anemia gene therapy, was the incredible risk that you were alluding to earlier, the medical risk, because you do have to totally disable your entire immune system in order to go in there and manipulate the genes. So I'm surprised that that wasn't mentioned in this story here about the therapy for restoring hearing.
I
Uh,
would guess it's not an issue, but I
mhm,
haven't looked at it
yeah,
to see. But there's another problem with all this stuff.
what's that?
$3.2 million, the current cost for the sickle cell treatment
Oh yeah, that's
before
great.
before you get to the doctor bill and other expenses
Hmm.
uh, that is involved. And that's a big issue. And even some of the people in Congress are noting this.
Yeah,
It
well,
came up to
Dave, one of the stories that we ran across is about how the U.S. is setting policy. I don't think it's been done yet, but they're about to set policy where patents that have been partially funded by government funds, patents on drugs, that is, where the commercial price is deemed too high, the Biden administration is going to go and set a new policy that allows it to seize the medicines, seize the patents of the medicines, and make them available to other groups at much more reasonable and affordable prices. That's a stunning development if that really comes to fruition.
it should have happened 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And the legislation that let the federal government march in and void the patent and allow other companies to make a drug it dates back to 1980.
Hmm.
Bidol, as it's called, and it has never been used.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I know about it because 24 years ago, 23 years ago, I heard Jamie, I think his last name was Love, testifying at the US Patent Office about how the government had the right to march in on an awful lot of drugs because many of the drugs out there start with government funded research at NIH
Mm-hmm.
or at universities. So this is a very big story if the Biden administration does it, and they just might. Uh, the well, it's not a funny thing, but the memorable thing, I heard Jamie Love when we were both testifying at the US Patent Office that the patent system was so extreme that it was driving up the cost of innovation and drugs in particular. Uh, the hearing was about a mile away from the Pentagon, and the news came that an airplane flew into that day, September 11th.
Oh wow, you're at the patent office that day, Dave?
I was down at the patent office, couldn't get out of Washington, couldn't get through to Jenny on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, I found a hotel that had an internet connection, could send her an email and tell her I was okay. But that was something to worry about.
Yeah.
I was in the neighborhood when
Yeah.
they took out
Yeah.
part of the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Now,
But Dan, I'm wondering is I'm just reading a quote from someone who's a White House advisor that's saying, I'm reading his quote. He says, "We'll make it clear that when drug companies won't sell taxpayer-funded drugs at reasonable prices, we will be prepared to allow other companies to provide those drugs for less." So does that mean that there's no legislation required? The legislation is already on the books, or it's a feature of the patent? What's the legal background?
legislation was put in there, bipartisan, by Dole, back in 1980.
Yes, Bob
And
Dole?
as I say, 24 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I learned about this because a major DC advocate was at the patent office testifying about it.
Mm-hmm.
This just hit the news again. The reporters should have known to put it together. But one of the drugs this was so controversial on is Ozempic,
Mm.
which I take for diabetes and helped me lose 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
Very dramatic. Everybody, it seems, wants to use it. Something like 75% of all American women are on a diet one time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the number for men, but it's certainly enough to notice.
So how expensive is that drug currently? Is that currently a very high-priced drug?
$15,000 a year.
Ooh, that's pretty
Which
steep.
is more than I can afford to pay. Fortunately, my income has gotten so low that the government is picking that up for me.
Mm-hmm.
And they're picking it up for what they fear is going to be so many people that it's going to plug $100 billion hole into Medicare and Medicaid in the near future.
Wow. That's a big hole.
That's a big and so this morning, Bernie Sanders gave a speech saying, this is what we have to do something about. It was actually developed at NIH, if I recall, one of the government labs.
Mm-hmm.
They discovered that there was a hormone the body produced, GLP-1, and when that was lacking, you put on a lot of weight and your sugar went up. That drug was basically discovered by the government.
Mm-hmm.
Drug companies who are selling things related to it, there's about 5 GLP-1s on the market. They're all very expensive. Just took some standard biomedical engineering and changed what the government found so that it lasts in the blood for a day and now for a week. And that's what Ozempic is. But it's basically a government-found drug. And wow. That's a whole lot of money. Now, one other warning. I'm a news junkie. So a lot of this that I bring to the air, I've seen first in the Times. Mm-hmm. And I do get the weekly email from 3 or 4 of the major medical journals. And Google News, if I go to medical and tech, often has stories that I hadn't found. That's where my stuff comes from. Mm-hmm. But most people do not read Science or Nature or Lancet, which is why it's important for me to bring some of these stories.
Yeah, well, that's why we're talking about this stuff on the air, to bring that stuff to folks who would otherwise not know about it. But Dave, we're about the halfway point. We got to take a break for a minute.
Okay. When we come back, all kinds of interesting AI stories.
Okay. Yeah. This Community of Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Dave Burstein and Stu Reed. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a brief musical break.
Your lips were like a red and ruby chalice, warmer than the summer night. The clouds were like an alabaster palace, rising to a snowy each star is on aurora borealis. Suddenly you held me tight. I could see the midnight sun or was that a nightingale? And then your arms miraculously found me. Suddenly the sky turned pale. I could see the midnight sun. Was there such a night? It's a thrill I still don't quite believe. But after you were gone, there was still some stardust on my sleeve. May dwindle to an ember, and the stars forget to shine, and we may see the meadow in December. I see white and crystalline. But oh, my darling, always I'll remember when your lips were close to mine, and we saw the midnight sun. It's a thrill I still don't quite believe. But after you were gone, there was still some stardust on my sleeve. It may dwindle to an ember, and the stars forget to shine, and we may see the meadow in December. I see white and crystalline. Always I'll remember when your lips were close to mine, and we saw the midnight sun, and we saw the midnight sun. And we saw the midnight sun.
Okay, we're back. Community Technology, Dave Bernstein and Stu Reed on WHCR 90.3 FM. Dave, we were talking about some of the new stuff going on in AI, some new headlines. Now, one of the things that caught my attention, and I'm not sure who it was, but one of the godfathers of AI testified in London that to the British government that there should be some sort of universal basic income to deal with the impact of AI on economic inequality. That's something that you and I have kicked around a little bit, but to see it, someone with this kind of stature say that, and say that to a government body such as, I'm not sure if it was Parliament, but someone in the British government, pretty stunning news.
It was Jeff Hinman of the University of Toronto,
Mm-hmm.
who spent a number of years at Google as well, whose work on neural networks was absolutely crucial to the neural networks that are heart of all the AI.
Mm-hmm.
That's why he gets called the godfather of AI sometimes. He really did crucial research, and he's enormously respected. He's 76 now.
Wow, okay.
He's still very cogent, and he's very aware of what may happen because of the work he did. I brought to the store a fellow who did a paper with Hinman named Yoshua Bengio. Yoshua, put a heartfelt letter out a few months ago, and we read it on the show, about how we didn't worry so much about what would happen because we thought it was years and years away.
Mm-hmm.
But suddenly, in the last few years, we've seen breakthroughs that may mean that changes that could change the world may happen very quickly.
Yeah, yeah. Now, we've talked about all the stuff that how it could impact society in general. But I just want to drill down for a moment on this guy's particular focus, where he said that AI would increase productivity and wealth, and that the money would go to the rich and not the people whose jobs get lost because of AI.
Now, where money goes, it's not something you usually go to a neuroscientist or computer science expert because they don't know, and a lot of them are making a big error on this.
Mm-hmm.
But I've heard the same thing or read the same thing and had some email with Eric Borenson, a prominent economist who's at Stanford,
mm-hmm.
who said it may go two ways. If we have smart policy, everybody will benefit. If we don't, only a few.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that is worth thinking about and worth knowing about. Stu, you've been the one who's been reporting UBI. Why don't you give people a brief explanation? I remember when you were doing it, I said, you do it because I'm in favor, but you know more than I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, UBI is a universal, or also called unconditional basic income. And basically the premise is that there should be some economic floor for everyone, regardless of their status, regardless of whether they have income or not. There should be a basic floor that helps sustain folks. UBI, universal or unconditional basic income, is what it's called. There have been a number of trials in San Francisco and Canada and Europe, and a number of cities have tried it, and it seemingly has worked. The skeptics say, oh, it's going to cause people to use drugs. It's going to cause people to not seek work. Well, none of that has happened. The marginalized communities where it has been tested, it has actually helped to invigorate those communities and those individuals and families. It's given folks the wherewithal to pursue creative opportunities. It's given folks the wherewithal to get their act together to go get more better paying jobs or better paying income opportunities through their own entrepreneurship. Um, so where it has been tried, it has worked. So it's again, the rationale is that there should be some basic level of income that ensures everyone's basic survival, food, shelter, basically cover those basic expenses, so that whatever you choose to do in terms of your professional work or your entrepreneurial work will help blossom and grow your wealth and your equity, and you won't be tied to a real slave, if you will. When I say slave, slang for a job that is just barely keeping you alive, just paying the bills to sustain you, and there's no growth, there's no hope, there's no real future economic for you. So UBI is a way to get out of that rat race and out of that economic trap that so many folks are in. And it's something that we've talked about on the show. We've had various experts on here on community and technology talking about that. And I guess the trick, Dave, is to convince enough folks to make it so, whether that be business, whether that be government, or whomever. But it's my sense has got to bubble up from the bottom, that folks have to begin to recognize what it is, embrace what it is, and advocate for it. Certainly, I think it's good to hear folks that are on the forefront of AI talking about how that could be a threat to the basic wherewithal for much of society. And even if it's not, UBI could be an incredible boon just to help productivity and self-development of so many people. That's my long and short conversation about UBI.
I live in the richest city in the world, New York.
Mm-hmm.
It's criminal that there are people who don't have a basic place to live.
Yeah.
Especially since many of them actually are working full time, but aren't making enough to break the down payment on an apartment in New York City at this point.
Yeah, can't pass the credit checks. I mean, the hurdles these days, Dave, are so arduous to rent an apartment in New York City. It's not like the old days when you and I were around shortly after our college days, and where you just needed a proof of income, and that was it. And these days, credit checks and references, it's very arduous these days to meet all the financial hurdles to rent an apartment, even if you have the money. That's just a starting point. That's necessary but not sufficient.
Something I didn't believe when I first read it many years ago, I think from Robert Theobald, is that giving everybody a universal basic income would probably not cost that much.
Mm-hmm.
What? It's a lot of money, but we're already paying so much in medical bills,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes housing subsidies, food stamps, and this huge bureaucracy that manages it all.
Mm-hmm.
That to just give people the money and let it go at that,
Yeah,
would not cost that much.
Mm-hmm.
Less than, for example, the U.S. is looking at spending on diet drugs if they don't bring the price down.
Mm-hmm.
Because we now have a good diet drug that works for most people for $15,000 a year.
Mm.
And will Medicaid cover it? Yes, if you're diabetic, which means it's already spending billions, maybe tens of billions. And if they start covering it for weight loss, and the price doesn't come down, that's going to blow the federal budget.
Yeah.
As Bernie Sanders said this morning in a big speech,
Mm-hmm.
and he's right about that.
I guess one of the fundamental hurdles, Dave, is that there's some very powerful interests that benefit from the inequality in society, and to change that would threaten their upper hand. And a lot of them have very powerful influence over government and corporations.
Well, the assumption that led Hinman to say they need UBI and led, well, Sam Altman, who I'm going to mention shortly, to tell the Times that a lot of the top people in Silicon Valley are now supporting UBI because they're afraid of what's going to happen, is that everybody in the field, or 98% of the people in the field, think sooner or later we're going to have machines that are smarter than people.
Mm-hmm.
What's going to happen then? Well, it's certainly going to knock a whole lot of people out of jobs.
Right.
And that's what Hinman is worried about. And that was why I said, actually, the people in AI who are the scientists who are saying this don't know basic economics. Because the level of employment, whether you personally are employed or whether a plant stays open in Flint, Michigan, that is affected by all these trends that we're seeing and will be affected by AI. But the overall number of jobs or number of people unemployed in a society can be modified dramatically with the standard monetary and fiscal policy. The government deficits that Keynes said we should run when there are a lot of people unemployed and have very successfully. For the last 5 years, under both Biden and Trump, we have had some of the lowest unemployment rates in 50 years. Mm. They're still too high, and that was because we were running such big government deficits, and also the Fed was doing something they called quantitative easing. So that if we start losing jobs to AI in any plausible number, government can replace the demand and will create more jobs. They may be terrible jobs. They may be essentially unavailable to you if you're 57 years old or live in the wrong part of the country. And AI is going to ruin a whole lot of people's lives, just as the internet is ruining the life of somebody who can't rent an apartment because on the internet, they can find out that 15 years ago, they had a fight with their landlord. Mm-hmm. They may have even been right. But at this point, the landlord just saying, no,
yeah,
you were in housing court. We don't want you. And that's why we have one of the reasons we have so many people who are homeless but are unemployed.
Yeah.
In California, they talk about how many people live in their cars because they still had a car from before, because they can't afford even a basic apartment anyway.
Yeah. Well, Dave, I think we should devote a show. For a while we were, I think we're going to reach back out to some of our UBI friends and experts and have them come on the show and talk about that some more, because that's such an important area. But we got about 5 minutes left, and I know there are a couple other things we wanted to cover before we sign off.
Two things. Mm-hmm. One, Microsoft has just released with various manufacturing partners a AI PC, a ordinary computer. The ones that I saw pictures of are all portable, that can run one heck of an AI program on the computer. Do we want to do that? Well, there's obviously a lot of things you can do with AI, including putting together a rundown of this show if I wanted to organize it. You can do simultaneous translation. It was up to 16 languages. I think it's now up to 50.
Wow.
You just put it on the table between you and your friend in the Ukraine, and you can talk to each other.
Wow.
That works. Now, Microsoft has put a special system they've defined called an AI PC, which has a very powerful neuroprocessing chip. Mm-hmm. It can handle 40 terabits of inference I'm not sure. There is only one company in the world that is making that chip at this point,
Really?
which is not Intel, it's Qualcomm, which has been modifying what they put into cell phones
Uh-huh.
to get into this. So all the advanced PCs coming in the West are going to start having AI built in. Now, what's Microsoft going to do with that? One thing they said they'd do is they will get everybody's complete life on their own computer. And because it's their own computer and not somebody in the cloud, you may be able to protect it. Is this now? But what are they going to do there? Well, they need for a $1,300 computer, which is one of the first ones that came out, has the 40 gigabits of on-chip memory for neural processing. They are going to track your entire life with your permission on your computer, possibly encoded so that nobody short of a government agency could decode it.
And I guess they're going to convince us that we need that, Dave. Why would anybody do that? I guess they're going to tell us why. Is that it?
Well, what they said actually makes sense. You've got everything you've written, every text you sent, every email you sent, sitting there.
So this is your life. Is that it? Here's Dave Bernstein. Here's Stu.
Well, you want to look up and say, who did I meet on my trip to Paris 6 months ago? It's going to usually be able to give you an answer. That's the kind of thing AI can do. And one of the things they're going to do to capture all this information is every few seconds, they're going to take a screenshot of your computer and store that for 90 days or more, so that anything you type on your computer is going to be in your personal AI, possibly sounding like Scarlett Johansson, as we opened the show with. That Google's new voice sounded just like the voice actress in the movie Her, who lots of people fell in love with, including, of course, the male character in that show. But a lot of people who just saw the movie fell in love with her. And people are having more and more AI girlfriends. That's exploding. So Microsoft's future is total information architecture under your control, done in your computer, that you can do today on a $1,300 computer from Asus, which is available in 30 days.
Wow.
I've been getting some of those out to reporters, not me. Well, there's lots more out there, but I think we have another show next week.
Yes, we do. I definitely want to talk about this personal AI computer some more, because that's fascinating where that can go, might go, and so much more.
Samsung's top phone, and soon, especially, and Google's top phone, and soon, especially, the next iPhone coming out in September is going to have something like this. Maybe not quite as powerful as you can put into the desktop, because there's more room and more power there. But this is going to be in everybody's cell phone, more and more, starting January this year.
Okay. All right. You heard it here first on Community and Technology. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Dave Bernstein, for staying on top of this stuff. You're really a font and a blessing to our audience. Thank you so much. Yes.
Just a geek who's a news freak.
Yes, he is. That's Dave Bernstein, folks. This is Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM. Every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Tune in. You just might learn something. Thanks. Good night.